Good evening, everyone. I thought that with the coronavirus outbreak upon us, a few questions sort of been asked of me about how do we sort of get through this? How do we deal with anxiety in a time of uncertainty? So I've put together a bit of a PowerPoint and I'm trying to record it. I've done everything I can to learn how to do it on Zoom, so this is all a bit new for me, but hopefully it's recording well and I'll be able to send it out for people to have a look at if it's something that they're interested in. So basically, what I'm trying to talk about is anxiety management in a time of uncertainty. So that's a picture of me when I was about 20 kilos lighter, but it's a good one to show people that never met me. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some existential thought regarding a moment like this, dealing with something like coronavirus in our society, and some historical thoughts about how we might deal with something like this. Then I'm going to look at just really quickly about what causes anxiety and what to look for in others that might be struggling with anxiety as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about coping, some mindfulness-based anxiety management, looking after yourself and how that can help with managing anxiety. I'm going to look at some anxiety management activities, and then looking at some things we might think about dealing with COVID specifically. So a little bit of a word from existentialism. So people who know me well will know that this is one of my favorite topics, and it's my theoretical framework within psychology. And one of the things I want to talk about is thrownness. Martin Heidegger came up with this idea that none of us would choose to be in the situation that we're in, and there's many issues and experiences that come up for us in life on a day-to-day basis that situations that we're kind of thrown into. We didn't ask to be in them, but now we're in them. So what do we do with it? And one of the most basic ways that we experience thrownness is that we are thrown into life. We are born when we're thrown into this world. We didn't ask to be born, but here we are. So now we get to choose how we want to live. And it's the same with thrownness in general everyday situations. Is we might be thrown into a confrontation, or we might be thrown into an argument, or we didn't ask for this to happen. We're thrown into this COVID situation that we never asked for, but now that we're in it, we get to choose how we negotiate it and how we navigate it on a day-to-day basis from a moment to moment. We can sit back and let it happen to us, or we can sort of start to choose how we navigate it, how we respond to it. Once thrown into a situation, we can choose to, but we can't really relinquish the responsibility for dealing with that situation. And it's in fact that relinquishing of responsibility that often leads to us having more problems, which we can talk about more. So the main point is that now that we've been thrown into this situation, how do we choose to negotiate it on a moment by moment, day by day basis? I like to think back to Viktor Frankl. Some people might have heard of Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And Viktor Frankl was a man who was interned in Auschwitz. He went to a number of concentration camps through the Second World War and through the Holocaust, but he was in Auschwitz for a long period of time, and he managed to survive. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about his concepts of meaning later on in the presentation. The last word will come from existentialism as well. But basically, the main premise that I want to come across here that he talked about is that now we've been thrown into this situation. We've been thrown into Auschwitz, and I can't escape. And the Nazis will make me go to work every day. They'll make me get up for roll call every day. They'll make me suffer. But no matter what they do to my physical body, they can't make me choose what I think about. They can't make me have a certain mindset. So his idea is this idea of freedom of thought and freedom to choose how I think about things, my attitude towards things, which I think is very, very important. We can sit and choose to have a negative attitude towards things, or we can choose to have a positive attitude towards things. We can choose to have an optimistic mindset over things rather than a pessimistic mindset towards things, or we can have a pragmatic mindset towards things. So it's no matter that we're thrown into this situation of isolation, we get to choose our attitude towards it. And I think that's really, really important, and something that Frankl definitely taught me and taught us from an existential point of view. So no matter what situation we find ourselves in, we can choose our attitude towards it. We can choose our actions towards it. We might only, and he argues also that we might have one choice before us, which is to self-isolate, to do the right thing within society, so that we don't catch the disease and we don't pass it on to other people. And some people might think, well, I have no choice but to do that. But we do have a choice. We have a choice not to do that as well. As much as it might not be much of a choice that we would choose, we still have a choice to choose the opposite and go out and catch it or pass it on to other people. So it is a choice. We must recognize that we have a choice in this. So it's within our control. It's not something that we are relinquishing choice on. And then when we make this choice, and whatever choice we make, we have to take responsibility for that choice. So hopefully these are very much the tenets of existentialism and existential thought. Hopefully I've been able to explain that well. But the main point that I would say from this is we have been thrown into this COVID-19 situation, and no matter how it affects us, we have the freedom to choose our attitude towards it, and we have the freedom to choose how we act in response to it, and we also have to take responsibility one way or the other for the choices that we make as we negotiate as the world negotiates its way through COVID-19. So a little bit about what causes anxiety and what to look for in others. So the first thing that leads to a sense of anxiety is uncertainty about some outcome. The more uncertain we feel about a situation, the greater the level of anxiety. So we don't know how it's going to turn out. I've had clients that have dealt with numerous different things and been affected by COVID-19. Some have gone for jobs that they now can't have. I've had clients that have come off the Ruby Princess. I've had clients that haven't been able to go to the funeral of loved ones because there hasn't been a funeral because of COVID-19. So the uncertainty of what's going to happen to us all in the future, can lead to a sense of anxiety. Also, there's this certainty of some outcome is also going to create anxiety. My boss is going to yell at me, or I'm going to lose my job, or I'm not going to have an income throughout the COVID-19. How out of control we feel in any particular situation will lead to anxiety. The perception that a specific situation is beyond our ability will lead to anxiety. Having an extrinsic motivational approach to something instead of an intrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation is it's like expectations. If people expect things of me and I don't feel like I can meet those expectations, it's going to create anxiety. And then social comparison, which is something that goes along a lot in society at the moment, which is about comparing myself to others. Am I as good as them? Do I have as much as them? What are they doing? What am I not doing? So worrying about what other people think, basically. So these things are going to lead to anxiety. What to look for in others when it comes to anxiety. So we want to look at signs of distraction. This person, usually they'd be really focused in on me, but now they're not. Expressing more concern than usual. Self-doubt about ability, where maybe they don't normally have doubt about their abilities. Excess worry or crankiness. Performance discrepancy, like usually they'd be operating extremely well under the circumstance, but now their abilities are well below what we would expect of them. Physically, looking for a flushed face, sweaty palms, dilated pupils, like a deer in headlights. Looking for pacing and walking up and down, not being able to sit still, fidgeting, yawning, rapid speech. These are all things we might look for in ourselves, but also to look for in others when it comes to anxiety, that someone might be experiencing anxiety or overly concerned about something. So I want to have a bit of a word on coping. Coping seems to be a word that's disappeared from the psychological lexicon recently, but I think it is well worth having a look at. And there's three types of coping. There's what we call task-oriented coping or active coping, emotion-oriented coping, and avoidance-oriented coping. So if we look at emotion-oriented coping, that's where we get really like about something. So we get really emotional about it, but we haven't done anything to take care of the situation that we need to cope with. Avoidance-oriented coping, we have social diversion, where we choose to go out to a party or go out to a friend's place or make a phone call to somebody. So we use our social connections to avoid a problem or to feel better about a problem. And there's also distraction: play video games, go to the movies, go shopping, drink alcohol, etc., etc. These are all ways that we can cope with a particular situation. But with emotional coping and avoidant coping, the problem remains. So looking at a task-oriented or an active coping method is the best way to go. So if we're going to look at optimal coping, we look at a task-oriented coping approach. So it's problem-focused and problem-solving focused. We got this problem and we need to deal with it. That's the only way that the problem is going to be sorted out. Then we're looking at taking direct action to alter the situation. Taking direct action to alter the problem reduces the amount of stress it evokes. I start to feel more in control of the situation, and I feel a sense of control over the situation. So taking an active coping, having an active approach to a problem is the optimal way of coping with it. So now we're going to move on to anxiety management and how we start to manage anxiety when it comes to us, and particularly during this COVID-19 outbreak. So we're going to first of all look at some mindfulness-based anxiety management techniques. So we want to stay in the present moment the best we possibly can. So anxiety is essentially a state of mind in which we are worried about something that hasn't happened yet and might not happen. So I essentially like to talk about anxiety as always being future oriented. So it's about something that hasn't happened yet, and by the way, might not happen. So the past, if we're looking at sort of negative emotional responses, tends to be about regret, remorse, shame, and guilt. They're things that we have done that now we can't change, and we sort of ruminate about these things. But anxiety is always about the future. And if we think about something that happened in the past, say I broke something, something in a shop, and someone saw me, well, the anxiety is not about what I did, but the anxiety is actually about getting in trouble for it, which hasn't happened yet. So anxiety about COVID-19 might be about, well, what's going to happen in the future? When am I going to be able to go out again? When can I see my friends again? When can I go to the movies? When can I get that massage? When is all this going to be over? Am I going to be able to keep my job and keep getting paid? So the anxiety is not happening now necessarily. It's the future that creates the anxiety. So the more we can, the thing is that we can't go into the past and change the past. We can't teleport ourselves into the future and fix the thing that we're worried about and come back to the present. The only way we can influence the future is by what we do now. So staying in the present moment is a really nice way of dealing with our anxiety. So therefore, the best way to cope with anxiety is to stay in the present moment as best as we can, as the here and now is the only place we can influence anything. So try not to foreclose your thinking. Remain curious, perhaps, to the future. So, so I'm going to lose my job. Oh, it's all going to be terrible is a way that creates anxiety and causes problems for the future. So try not to close our thought yet. It hasn't happened yet, and it may not happen. So remain curious. I wonder. I'll be interested to see these kinds of mindsets towards the future. So if we talk about mindfulness specifically, mindfulness is an ancient Buddhist art of being present in the here and now, the present moment, not thinking into the future or the past. Mindfulness, therefore, has two key aspects. Awareness, paying attention to and be aware of the present moment, whether that be eating, breathing, walking, or cleaning your teeth, or even watching a television show. Are we watching a television show, or is it just noise in the background? So being aware of the present moment and what's going on around us. And acceptance, accepting our thoughts and our feelings as they are without judgment towards them. Simply experiencing them as they are and remembering that a thought is just a thought. A thought can't actually do anything. It can influence our feelings and our behaviors, but until we actually do something, then a thought is just a thought. We don't have to actually act on it. So mindfulness continued. So become mindful of your thoughts. Be completely focused on what you're doing in the here and now when we're trying to be mindful. What can I see? What can I feel? What can I smell? What can I hear? What can I taste? These are all ways that can ground us in the present moment and help us to be mindful. If we're trying to be actively mindful and we start to notice our thoughts drifting off somewhere else, gently bring your thoughts back to the present moment. Go back to the senses again. What can I see? What can I feel? What can I smell? What can I hear? What can I taste? Mindful walking, it's not a bad way of dealing with anxiety, and a good way to be have a nice mindful walk when we get out into the street and we're going for a walk, maybe through a forest or down a pathway. I like to talk to my clients about having a daily color. So when we see, as we go for our walk, instead of just going for that walk, try to find, say if today's color is red, what colors of red can I find in my environment? I might have done this walk 100 times, but I bet you if we start to become more mindful as we walk, we'll start to pick things up we've never seen before. So if we use a color, for example, I can start scanning my present environment. I'm being in the present moment, trying to find everything that's red. And once I see something that's red, we need to have a little bit of creativity. But what kind of red is it? We can start to think to ourselves, what would that red feel like if I could touch it? What sort of smell would that red have if I could smell it? And if I could hear that color red, what would it sound like? And if I could taste that color red, what would it taste like? So it keeps us in this present moment. It keeps us curious into the present moment. And then tomorrow it might be blue, and the next day it might be green. And so we've gone on the same walk, but we've had a completely different experience every single day. When we're cleaning our teeth, when we're eating, or when we're driving, we can look at, being in the present moment. When we're cleaning our teeth, I know that I do this. I'll clean my teeth. I'll walk around my bedroom, walk around, and while I'm cleaning them, I'm not really focused on the cleaning. But if we stay in the present moment and maybe watch in the mirror as we clean our teeth, to the back of our teeth, to the top of our teeth, etc., it's a way of staying in the present moment. A lot of when we're eating, we might be hungry and we sort of hoe into our food. But, I've done experiments before when I can get a client to take 7 minutes to eat just one almond, as we sort of really take into account the almond and all aspects of eating the almond. It's a really interesting thing that we can do. So, enjoying our food, not hoeing it down, but enjoying every mouthful and savoring it and smelling it and taking in the flavor as we eat is another way that we can be mindful. Become aware of your body and how it feels. We're going to talk about progressive muscle relaxation a little bit later, but it's a way of getting to know our body and feeling at one with it, knowing if there's any tight spots. So doing a scan through our body can be a really way of being mindful. Diaphragmatic breathing is one that I like to teach everybody. It's a little bit hard to do a full teaching of diaphragmatic breathing without showing myself doing it. But when we get anxious, we can tend to breathe quite shallow, so we're not getting enough oxygen into our body. So breathing is the body's most natural and most effective form of anxiety regulation. By using diaphragmatic breathing, it's a straight up to mindfulness technique, because as you'll see, we need to focus on breathing with our belly rather than our chest as we normally might. And we also have to do some counting in our head, so it brings us into the present moment. Breathing gets us, by doing this deep breathing, we get the oxygen we need to think clearly and for our body to repair. Keeps us in the here and now. It's a grounding technique. It keeps our center of gravity low. If we breathe with our upper body, with our chest, it tends to bring our center of gravity higher off the ground. We can feel less stable on our feet. So if we keep our shoulders nice and low and our body nice and low, we can tend to feel this nice lower center of gravity and feel more balanced and grounded. It minimizes tension in our muscles, particularly the shoulders, if we keep them nice and loose. So as you can see from this slide, we kind of want to make sure that our belly goes out to allow the air into the bottom of our lungs rather than our chest going up. And so that's how we want to breathe. We want to try to use the lower third of our lungs that we don't normally use. And then when we're breathing out, so our belly, but when we breathe in, our belly button goes out away from us. And when we breathe, when we breathe in, our belly goes out away from us. And when we breathe in, our belly button goes towards our spine. And when we breathe, we want to do it nice and rhythmically. This is where the idea of controlled breathing comes in. So when we breathe in, we want to breathe in 2, 3, 4, hold our breath, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, and we're holding it there. Wait, 2, 3, 4. So when we breathe, we want to do at least one cycle. What you see there on the screen is one whole cycle of diaphragmatic breathing. We want to do at least 4 every time that we stop to do some breathing, do some diaphragmatic breathing. But remember, we can't overdose on breathing. So do as many cycles as you want. We can use them in different ways. We can do them just cause. A nice way of doing some regular mindfulness throughout the day is to do our breathing breakfast, lunch, dinner, just before bed, or breakfast, mid-morning, lunchtime, mid-afternoon, dinner, just before bed, in bed. So these are some ways we can use breathing to be mindful. We can also use progressive muscle relaxation. So have a think through your body. Do you do a scan from head to toe? Do we have any tight spots? Are we clenching anywhere? Are we holding tension somewhere in our body? Well, we can breathe into that spot, or we can just actively shut our eyes and imagine that body part letting go. Or the other way we can do it is gently tense our whole body, like squeezing our fist and then letting it go. Squeeze a muscle really tight and then let it go. So that's another way of doing progressive muscle relaxation. And another way is to systematically relax your body. So laying on the ground or sitting in a chair, quiet and comfortable. Start at the top of your head or start at the tips of your toes and work progressively up or down your body. Imagining as we go that each muscle group is melting into the floor. So we're actively trying to let go of all the tight spots, all of our muscles in our body. A pleasant thought. This is a nice one to do. So a present thought can break your thought patterns and take you to a place that you find relaxing. If it's a moment that we're feeling a bit tense, that we're feeling like things are a bit hard, well, we might think of somewhere really pleasant that we want to be. Maybe it's a beach. Once again, using our 5 senses. What can we see at that beach? Is it a deserted beach? Are there lots of people around? What can we hear at the beach? What can we feel at the beach? Have we got shoes on? Have we not got shoes on? Can we feel the sand between our toes? Can we hear the wind? Can we hear the waves? Or is it crashing waves? Or is it a nice calm day at the beach? But if we're going to use it as an anxiety management technique, we need to have practiced with the thought first. So we want to make sure that it does what we want it to do, which is to help us feel relaxed. So ensure you practice with the thought. So once again, using your 5 senses to imagine what it'd be like to be in that place. And imagine being in your pleasant place as accurately as possible. So not just thinking about it, but really trying to get ourselves into that moment. Visualization, if we're worried about doing something, try to picture ourselves executing that skill or executing that thing excellently. I've thought about doing this video a few times in the last 24 hours. Picture yourself doing something positive or doing something well. Focus on your standards and process, not on the outcome, but just the process of doing something. That's what we want to use with our visualization. In sports setting, it's imagining the ball going through the goals, if that's what I'm trying to do with the ball. So let's look at looking after our physical self. One of the things that we tend to do when we get anxious is we tend to speed things up. I see this in athletes all the time. We just want to get it over and done with because it's just causing so much anxiety. We don't really care about how we do it. We just want to get it over and done with. So rather than speed things up when we feel anxious, slow things down. Take a moment. Use our 5 senses to just make sure we're grounded in the present moment. So slow down and take your time and start to feel a sense of control over the situation rather than feeling out of control. Then also come with a good plan or a strategy and stick to it when we're trying to work something out or work through something. The need to speed up can lead us to acting impulsively. And, we just want to do something when sometimes the best course of action might be to actually do nothing. Don't send that text message. Don't make that phone call. Don't send that email when we're feeling anxious. So slow ourselves down, have a think about it before we react, have a good plan or strategy and stick to it. Sleep is very important when we're feeling a generalized sense of anxiety. But in the same time, it might be something that we find hard to do if we're feeling anxious. So sleep is something that we must seduce. It's not something we can demand. Think about your partner or someone that you're attracted to. We can't just make them be our partner. We kind of have to seduce them and make them want to be with us. And it's the same with sleep. So the anxiety can have a detrimental effect on sleep. So one of the things I'm noticing in this COVID-19 situation is that I'm less active than I usually would be, and I have to be really mindful to get a walk in, or walk down and get my coffee rather than driving down to get it, or walk down to the post office rather than driving down there. So the less activity we have, the less tired we might be at night. So it might be detrimental to sleep. But even if you're having difficulty sleeping, try to get as much rest as you possibly can. Remembering that sleep is a period of rejuvenation, so it's very, very important that we continue to try to get good sleep during this time. Avoid alcohol use to try to sleep. It tends to keep us in stage 4 sleep rather than allowing us to come into rapid eye movement sleep, which is our rejuvenating part of sleep. So try to avoid alcohol if possible to try to get to sleep, or minimize your alcohol use for sure, because you want to try to get that rejuvenating sleep in REM sleep. Use sleep hygiene techniques, and I'm happy to provide a tip sheet when it comes to sleep hygiene techniques, but you can also Google sleep hygiene and you'll find all kinds of information about what that is. If you can't sleep due to rumination, here's a couple of things you can try. Use your diaphragmatic breathing that we've just been through, or just some deep breathing to try to focus on controlling it, making it nice and slow, and then that will keep us really mindful and in the present moment, instead of thinking about or ruminating about things that we might not be able to deal with at that time of night. And have a pen and paper next to your bed. Having a pen and paper next to the bed makes it very easy to write down those ruminating thoughts, so those things that we can't sort of get out of our head. If we write them down, then we've got a record of them, and then we don't have to just keep going over them and over them in our head. We ruminate because we want to remember. If we write them down, then we've got a record that we can come back to in the morning. Nutrition is going to be very important during this time with the less activity that we're getting. Make sure we eat healthy. For those who are anxious, their body is wound up enough and doesn't need further stimulation. So try to avoid or limit the amount of caffeine, tea, coffee, soft drink, and chocolate. Limit cigarette smoking because that's a stimulant. Limit alcohol and other drug consumption as it may lead to longer-term problems. Drink plenty of water. Always very important to remember when it comes to nutrition. Make sure we're well hydrated. Exercise. So a few things on exercise. Before we start out on any exercise activity, I must have the disclaimer that always get clearance from your GP before engaging in any exercise program. But it's also, if we're beginnings, a lot of us might be quite fit already, but if we're going to start out trying to look at an exercise regime now, make sure we plan to underachieve in the beginning, because trying to overachieve when it comes to our goal setting can actually become demotivational. So one of the things we might do is, instead of saying, I'm going to go for a 5-kilometer walk, let's just go for 500 meters. It's easy to achieve. It will build our confidence, and it will tell us that we're actually capable of doing this, and we're more likely to try to get stuck into it again the next day and the day after that. So that's just at the beginning. So start out slow and build up with our exercise regime. So remembering that exercise has multiple health and mental health benefits, which I won't go into too much at the moment, but keeping in mind that it's really good for us from a mental point of view, not only a physical. So what kind of exercise should we do? Well, the best form of exercise is one you enjoy. So it depends on what you want to achieve. Also is what kind of exercise that you might choose. Taking the dog for a walk is a good one. If you haven't got a dog to take for a walk, take yourself for a walk. We can look at strength and resistance training, gym and CrossFit, aerobic exercise, walking, running, bike, swim, team sports. These days with the team sports we can't do, and the swimming we can't do because the pools are closed, but we can certainly go for a walk, go for a run, or ride a bike, as long as we're keeping our distance from others, of course. Mindfulness type of exercises such as yoga and Tai Chi are things that we can also do for exercise. So what sort of dosage, people sort of ask me as well when it comes to exercise? Well, according to the World Health Organization, for people 18 to 64, should be aiming to achieve throughout the week, accumulating at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical exercise. So that might be 3 50-minute exercise attempts during the week, or it might be 5 30-minute periods or sessions of exercise, or accumulating 75 minutes of vigorous intensity exercise during the week, and try to get into strength and resistance training sessions per week as well. That's lifting weights or doing some push-ups or doing some sit-ups, those sorts of things. One of the things that's being researched a lot within the literature at the moment is getting out amongst nature to exercise and the benefits that that has on mental health. So when we are going to exercise, try to get out amongst nature. Go for a walk in amongst trees, go for a hike, ride along a tree-lined path. Or go mountain biking, of course. If you got a mountain bike, get out amongst the trees. Or if you even want to meet up with a friend during this time, can you and a friend take chairs and sit a distance apart from each other, a safe social isolating distance from each other, and have a conversation, but be amongst trees, be amongst nature, listen to the breeze, listen to the birds. So looking at some other anxiety management techniques, we want to look at cognitive reframing. We can challenge our thoughts if we're starting to feel anxious about something. We can ask ourselves, is what I'm thinking realistic? If it's not, change it. If what I'm thinking positive, if not, change it. Is there another way to think about the situation? If so, change it if it's creating anxiety. Is what I'm thinking helpful? If it's not helpful, maybe we want to change it. Let's look at a little bit of optimal self-talk as well. So one of the things I like to say is caution. Whether you say something positive or negative to yourself, be careful because you're listening. You might just believe it. So be very careful what our internal dialogue happens to be. Be mindful of your self-talk and make sure that it's positive. A lot of people make the mistake of they think they're saying something positive to themselves, but it's actually coming out negative. So we might think of in sport, say in cricket or baseball or softball, when the ball's coming towards us, we might say, don't miss the ball, don't miss the ball. And of course, that's trying to make sure that we do connect with the ball, but that actually has a very negative connotation to it. It's actually because the one thing that we know is the human brain doesn't tend to hear the word don't, it just hears what comes after it. So if I'm saying to myself, don't miss the ball, what my mind is hearing is miss the ball. So what we want to try to say instead, a positive way of saying it is hit the ball, catch the ball, smack the ball. So we're actually saying what we're going to do, not what we're not going to do, is the way that we talk about positive self-talk. We also want to look at whether our self-talk is instructional or motivational. These are the ways that we start to talk about our self-talk. So instructional self-talk is just as I was saying, is catch the ball, hit the ball, go after, the ball, etc. Is it motivational? I've got this, I can do this, I've done it before, I'm going to do it again. So that's motivational self-talk in a nutshell. Another thing we can do is have pleasant event scheduling to help us with anxiety. So future events can create anxiety. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, or I don't know what's going to happen with that date, with that interview, with that exam. So what we can do is just after that stressful event, we can plan for a pleasant activity, getting a massage, getting a coffee, having some ice cream, getting some pizza, watching a movie. So the idea is that we look past the stressful event and see that life goes on. Life doesn't end with that stressful event, so we can start to take some of that stress out of it. So rather than it feeling like the end of the world, reward ourselves. We're not going to reward ourselves in this case for success or failure. We're going to reward ourselves for the effort, for having actually done it. Plan a pleasant event for after the upcoming event to reward yourself for the commitment you've shown to it. Maybe at the end of COVID-19, we planned something really pleasant for ourselves that we got through it. Follow through with the activity despite the outcome. So no matter what happens with the stressful event or the anxiety provoking event, make sure that we follow through with the pleasant event at the end of it. It has the effect of reducing anxiety and increases well-being. Another way that we can regulate anxiety is through music. So it can be a great way to regulate emotion. But when we're using music, make sure that we are mindful of the people around us so that we're not creating anxiety for them by the use of our music. Pre-select our music and create a playlist. So we want to make sure that the music that we've chosen to help us to relax or to help us to get rid of anxiety actually works. Is this song that we've chosen actually something that does relax me, or does it create more anxiety for myself? So we want to be very careful and mindful of that. Also, be mindful of lyrics. We could be listening to a song that has a bit of an uplifting beat, but the lyrics are really negative. So, you know, if we look at "Lose Yourself" by Eminem, it's a song that tends to pump people up, and eventually has a very positive message. But most of the song is him talking about how anxious he is, about throwing up from anxiety, etc. So we want to be very careful about the lyrics, and that they don't have a negative subliminal effect on us when we're listening to this music. So make sure it does do what we want it to do, which is to help us to relax. Get organized if we're feeling anxious. A lot of people feel anxious, as we said before, because they feel out of control. So what we want to do is get organized. So create a to-do list of things that need to be done. We want to, and then once we've done that to-do list, prioritize the tasks that are on that to-do list. Then make a schedule on how we're going to get those tasks done. Compartmentalize. So each time we're working on a task, a particular task, focus only on that task. And then once we finish that task, then we put it aside, and then we open another compartment into the next task or the next part of our day. Make sure we transition between compartments as well, so that we're letting go of the one compartment before we move on to the next compartment. This is very, very important. So focusing on one thing at a time. And then once we've set all that in place, get to work, get that task done. So one thing at a time, and we'll do it to as long as we can, until we've done as much as we can. And then once it's done, move on to the next one. Cross that off, get to the next thing. Worry time is an interesting thing that we can look at, which is that during the day, we might be ruminating about something, and we might be worried about something. We might go out and forget that we paid that bill, or we're laying in bed if we've got to pay that bill and we can't pay it right then. Well, use a pad or some other device to list all our worries as we arise. We don't do anything with the worry at that time, but we just list it down, and then we set aside 30 to 60 minutes of our day, say 5 till 6 or 4 till 5, and that's our worry time. We're allowed to deal with our problems and deal with the things that need to be done during that 30 to 60 minute window that we've set aside for ourselves. And this is the only time of the day that we're allowed to worry about our worries. But it's not just about sitting there panicking or being anxious or worrying about our problems. It's actually a time to take an active approach to problem solving, where the time is dedicated to listing, prioritizing, scheduling, strategizing solutions to our problems, and getting them taken care of. Contingency plan management. This is the what ifs. You know, in life, nothing ever runs completely smoothly, and there's always things that are going to go wrong. Some people might think that this is a negative way of thinking about it, but let me tell you, if you've got a plan B, plan C, plan D in place, then if a plan A doesn't work, it's not sitting around thinking, what do I do now? What's going to happen? Well, I just roll straight into plan B. So this is a chance to list the things that might not go to plan, but we don't stop there. We come up with solutions to potential issues. You know, what if I do lose my job? What if I don't make the same level of income? What can I do? What plans can I put in place? So have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C for each issue. This gives us a sense of control over things that might go wrong ahead of time. I can tell you right now that military, police, SAS all do this. It's actually seen as a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. It gives us a sense of control over things, and it reduces the amount of time spent if things do go wrong. We just roll into plan B, and if plan B doesn't work, we roll into plan C straight away. We've already planned for it. We don't need to sit around and worry. So look at some apps. There's some apps out there that can be helpful, that can designed to battle anxiety involving mindfulness, guided meditation and breathing. Headspace is one that I highly recommend and has some free parts to it, but there are some parts that you do have to pay for as well. There's one called Breathing, there's one called 3-Minute Mindfulness, or Simple Habit. These are all apps that most of us can get on our phones and can help us with some guided mindfulness and meditation. One of the things I like to talk to people about is giving ourselves a break. So we can all be too hard on ourselves at times, and however, this is a time to give ourselves a break. When things don't go well, give ourselves a break. You know, nobody else is going to, so we have to be responsible to give it to ourselves. Let the issue wash over us rather than it cling to you. Just don't let it go. Forgive yourself if you've done something that you're not particularly happy about. Think about another way to think about it is, okay, well, that didn't go well this time. What's something I can do next time to give myself a greater opportunity for success, for a greater opportunity for things to work out the way that I want them to? And one of the things I like to say to clients sometimes is you wouldn't be down on your friend like this if they made a mistake. You'd be saying, you know, give yourself a break. You know, everything will be okay. So why do it to yourself? If it's good enough to say to a friend, why not apply it to ourselves as well? So I just want to go over some last couple of things that can help us dealing with COVID-19 specifically. So I want to look at effective social support. So effective social support is an interesting term. So we want to make sure, I tend to look at it more as, is this social support that is in the direction of my values and in the direction of my goals? So I might be a young man that has a great social support, but all my great social support is going out and getting drunk every night. So I've got great social support, but it's not really effective in the direction of my goals and my values. So we want to make sure that in this time we pick effective social support. It's social support that's helpful, not unhelpful. So use effective communication with my social support. Let people know what I need from them. If it's a time of anxiety for me, or if I'm feeling lonely or isolated, reach out to people. Let people know what you need. Can we get creative about socializing during this time of not being able to be within 1.5 meters of people, not being able to have touch, human touch, etc. So how can we get creative? So maybe we can use electronic means of keeping connected with people. We can text people. We can use chat rooms for people. We can have group chats on WhatsApp, or we can use our phone. We can call people. We can leave voice messages, video chats, etc., etc. Another way, maybe I heard this from someone on CNN who was saying that they were sitting on him and his wife were sitting on Joe Biden, actually, the US presidential hopeful, was sitting on stairs in the backyard, and they would set up 2 deck chairs about a couple of meters away from them in the backyard, and their grandkids would come through the back gate and just sit in those chairs, and that's how they would interact. So I talked about this a little bit earlier in the video about maybe trying to be creative that way. Find enjoyable activities during this time. Take some time out for yourself to help with your anxiety. How can I have fun in my own company, or just with only the people that are in my house? Plan things to do that you enjoy doing, that will wind you down. Think about some hobbies that you've got, or hobbies that you used to have that you've sort of let go a little bit. Play board games, do some reading, watch some movies, watch some documentaries, watch TV series. This is a great excuse to sit in front of Netflix for long periods of time. Are there things that you've been putting off that you now have some time for? This is something I work with injured athletes, or people that are on work cover. They're out of work at the moment because of injuries. This is a time to start getting into things that we might have been putting off, that we might have not had time for. Spring cleaning, for example, or cleaning out a cupboard. Or another thing is there a project you've been thinking about that you been wanting to get done that you've been putting off? Painting the house, or once you're learning a new recipe, or learning a language, or starting a course, or getting some of that paperwork done that you've been putting off for a while, or just doing some creative writing that you wanted to do. Now's a really good time to get stuck into it. Or is there a friendship or a relationship that needs nurturing, or fixing, or healing, or just starting up again? This is a really good time to start doing that as well, reaching out to people that we might have let go, unfortunately. Spend some time planning what it is that you do once the isolation is lifted. What's the first thing you're going to do? What are you looking forward to the most when all this is over? Spend a little bit of time daydreaming, a little bit of time fantasizing about what it is that you're looking forward to doing once all this is over. So just as I started with some existentialism, I kind of want to finish with some existentialism as well. So there's this concept of meaning in suffering, or finding meaning in suffering. So what meaning can we find during this period of time? What's important to us? What are we learning about ourselves? And trying to find some meaning in this difficult time that we're going through, and find some worth in it. So, for example, if solitude is something that you're experiencing a lot more of, and it's not something that you're used to, or not something that you seek out, can we start to enjoy that? And one of the things I was thinking about when I was putting this together is, can we improve our relationship with ourselves during this time? Nietzsche has a bit of a cruel saying, which is, if you feel lonely when you're alone, then you're in bad company. So maybe it's a time that we can start to improve our relationship with ourselves in this time as well. is, thinking about, ways of finding meaning in suffering. Is there anything that we're now starting to find that we appreciate a little bit more than we did before? Something that we might have been able to just do any old time we felt like it, but might have just taken for granted. Is there something we appreciate a little bit more now than we used to? And as I said before, what's the first thing that you're going to do when this isolation is lifted? I know exactly what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is book a holiday and get a massage. So they're two things I'm going to be doing straight away when all this is over. So what is it that you're going to do that once this isolation is lifted? And is there something that you can do for others at this time? It might not be something you can do physically, but is there something you can do to volunteer? Are there clothes that you can that you instead of throwing out or leaving in the closet? Is it something that you can donate some clothes? Can you donate some money? I've had a client telling me today that they're making face masks to donate. Have another client who makes laundry bags and sends them overseas to soldiers who are deployed overseas. So is there something we can do for others in this time? Are there other people that might be suffering, or other people that are experiencing anxiety? Can we reach out to them and just try to make their day a little bit better? And so this concept of meaning and suffering comes once again from Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, and he tended to think that one of the things that got him through was maintaining his values, maintaining his dreams in life, treating people the same as he would have treated them before he was interned in Auschwitz, no matter who they were. And most of all, what kept him going was the idea of looking forward to something that was important to him. And he looked forward to seeing his wife and parents again that he'd been separated from when he was interned in Auschwitz. So he lived through this entire war and survived Auschwitz just so he could see his wife and parents again. And that's what got him through. Unfortunately, and this is a bit of a sad ending, they didn't survive the Holocaust, but that's what got him through. And it's the same with us. I mean, we're not going through anywhere near the Holocaust or a war, Second World War, First World War, Vietnam War, but we are in a time that's really testing us, and it's testing all of us, and it's about all of society coming together to get through this really well. So if we can find some meaning in the suffering, find some purpose to it, it can help us to really reduce our anxiety and really grow during this period as well. So coming to the end now, hopefully we might have found some meaning in suffering. What's going on there? Get rid of that. So once again, to look at the summary, we looked at some existential thought. We looked at, we've been thrown into this situation against our will, but now we get to choose how we navigate it, how we feel about it, how we think about it. We get to choose to find some meaning and some purpose in this suffering that we're all going through. We looked a little bit at what causes our anxiety, which is generally feeling out of control or feeling like something is too big for us. So let's cut it down. Let's come back to the present moment and look at the things that we can control. Look at the things that we can put in place to help us to feel more in control of our situation. We looked at coping and looked at an active process is the best way to cope with something. Doing something to the problem or about the problem is the best way of making sure that problem goes by the wayside or doesn't cause so much distress anymore. We looked at some mindfulness-based anxiety management. We looked at how we can look after ourselves physically, same as always, same as recovery from anything. Good nutrition, good sleep, good getting exercise, and good hydration are the things that we have to look at. Anxiety management activities, we looked at worry time. We looked at, writing things down, making lists, prioritizing, and getting stuck into things as we go. We also looked at some anxiety management. We looked at, I already said that, sorry. We also looked at some specific ways of dealing with COVID-19. How do we get creative during this period? There's some projects that we've been putting off that we can now get stuck into, things that we can focus on. Are there creative ways that we can socialize with others? So don't get a chance to answer any questions right now, but of course, if you have any questions, you can always give me a call or send me an email. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. If there's any other videos that you'd like me to do, any other presentations you think that would be interesting at the moment, feel free to suggest them. So I've got some time in my hands to do those things. I do have another another presentation that I'm putting together on resilience, which I'll get to. I've already put together, and I'll video record that soon. And also want to look at communicating during a time of stress as another one that I'm going to put together as well. So hopefully you've all enjoyed this. Please let me know how you feel about it. Hopefully only positive feedback, but the most important thing to me now is making sure that this is recorded. So thanks for listening, and hopefully I'll see you all soon.